Welcome to the Blue Watch, your backstage pass to the lives of frontline officers and the leadership steering the way. I'm Chris Casto. From Echelon Front, the group behind Extreme Ownership, Danny Ziem joins us today. Danny is a former firefighter and SWAT TAC medic who now serves as a first responder training coordinator for Echelon Front. Danny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's an honor to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
I really do appreciate it. Now let's talk about the world of extreme ownership. It seems like a very simple concept, right? Owning when you mess up. But, tell me a little bit about why is it so important, and also why is it so hard for some folks to kind of dive into it?
Extreme ownership is difficult for a few reasons, but the primary reason, honestly, because it goes against all natural human instincts. Everything in us, think about it, from being a really small child. What's your primary intent? Get out of trouble, right? Survive. And so we take this into adulthood, we take this into work environments, into relationships. So willingly stepping out and saying like, "Hey, that's on me," it's not naturally wired into our brains. I'll give you an example. Like I have children, right? And a lot of people that have children, most good parents, we're not teaching our children to lie, right? In fact, in my house, it's like a carnal sin. Like I don't do well with lie, right? I was just raised that way. And so I don't teach my kids to lie, but what do they still do sometimes? They'll
Oh,
still still try to get out of trouble, right?
yeah,
Because they
because
don't
they don't want
know.
to get in trouble. No, it wasn't me that spilled the milk.
Exactly.
The dog did it.
Exactly, right? They'll blame it on anything, their brother, the dog, the inanimate object in the room. It's because it's like this ingrained innate survival instinct to us, which is the exact opposite of willingly falling on the sword and saying, "Hey, this is my fault." But it's critically important because honestly, extreme ownership's the root of all success. We can't sit around and blame other people for our problems or nothing will get done, period. But it definitely goes against how we are hardwired all the way from little kids and then all the way up through the stressors of everything we experience in life and business and relationships, you name it.
Yeah. Do you think is it the ego that kind of keeps us locked into that set? Is that like the biggest block in adopting this extreme owner mindset?
Yeah, I think at the young age, like I said, it's just kind of like self-preservation. It's like a survival instinct. And then, of course, as we get older, we start to develop that ego. And I like to joke sometimes when I'm training with agencies or corporations, or whatever, I have a large room. I'm like, hey, every single person in this room has this ego, and it's the ego will run your life. The ego loves you so much, it'll love you to death. And I'm like, and if you're sitting in this room and you're like, well, my ego's not that bad, you're probably the worst one, like in the whole room. It's usually how it works. So I'd say it's actually kind of a double approach, like ego for sure, closely followed by fear. And most of the fear is honestly tied directly into your ego because what are we afraid of? We're afraid of looking stupid. We're afraid of losing respect. We're afraid of consequences. We're afraid of how it's gonna make us look for our peers or subordinates or whatever, or superiors. Ego is a major driving factor for everything we do. And it's not always bad, right? Like all the tough stuff and hard things I've ever done in my life, why do you think I did it? A lot of it was ego driven. It's performance and pride driven, right? So yeah, that the ego is a huge aspect when left unchecked. If we can subordinate our ego and use it for the important things like the betterment of the team or pushing the needle forward for the overall mission, then okay, cool. But man, when it stops us from doing the right thing, that's when it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah, and I like how you talked about kind of that fear. And one of the things that I see a lot of times is people are afraid to, hold others accountable, like for expectations. They don't want to become the bad guy, when
Yeah.
it comes to holding people accountable. But, clear expectations is like really important. Talk a little bit about like how that fear and not holding people accountable can kind of derail this extreme ownership.
So when we talk about accountability, this is a two-part thing I think is really important that we hit on. Obviously, we're supporters of accountability to Echelon Front and everything that we do and teach. However, we do have a little bit of a different approach to it. And here's what I mean by that. External accountability, when I'm looking to hold someone else accountable or hold the line on something or something like that, external accountability should really be like step number 6.
Hmm.
And here's what I mean by that. When we look at the laws of combat, for those that have read the book Extreme Ownership, there's 4 primary laws of combat. There's cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. And then we also have these mindsets for victory. The major one is obviously extreme ownership. So those 5 things, those are a checklist for me. Before I ever want to look at someone else to hold them accountable, I want to do some self soul searching and internal accountability searching with those five things. So, like under cover and move, I'm going to ask myself, hey, what's my relationship with this person or this entity? Like, is this leading to the problem, that whatever the problem is, right? And if I find a problem, I have to fix it before I go somewhere else. So, what's my relationship like? And then I go to simple, which is primarily based on simple, clear, concise communication. So, hey, is my communication busted here? Does this person actually not understand? Was I not simple, clear, and concise? Did I communicate something ineffectively? And if I find a problem, I fix it. Prioritize and execute. We talk about having to be able to know what the highest priority is, the priority that pushes the mission or the team or pushes the needle the furthest, the highest point of impact. And we can only see those when we're detached from our emotions, right? So I ask myself, does this person actually know what our priorities should be? Did I adequately describe those? Or am I emotionally sucked in? And this actually isn't a big problem, but I'm upset for some reason because I'm not emotionally detached. Then we get to decentralized command. Did I empower this person? Like, what made them feel like this was the right decision? Were they afraid to do the right thing because they didn't have my blessing? Did I create an environment where I'm micromanaging? Right. So is that part of the problem? And then, of course, finally, extreme ownership. What's my part in this? Right. So, like, of all of these things, am I sitting around waiting for them to make a change? Did I wait too long? Has this been going on for 3 months and I didn't correct it when I saw it? Like, that's a me thing, right? So these are all internal pieces that I'm searching for before I look to external accountability. Now, external accountability is a thing. We're not saying don't hold other people accountable. Extreme ownership doesn't like absolve everybody of consequences, right? That's not the goal.
Right.
But the goal is to search ourselves first. Now, external accountability, you will get there. If I've worked through that checklist and I've made all these corrections to the best of my ability, we're still having this problem. Of course, escalation of counseling, external accountability, holding the line on some of these things is drastically important, right? And where we fail a lot and where I see like with police, fire, EMS, military units, of course, in corporate America too, is people feel like we want to be people's friends. And you should have good relationships, especially if you're in a tight knit group, like a special operations group of some sort of whatever. But man, if you really want to do your friends a favor, hold the line.
Mm.
Hold the line on accountability. What you'll realize is that most people think they're doing their friends a favor by cutting them slack. Hey, look, in the environments that we work, you're not doing anybody a favor by failing to overcome the buddy to boss transition. Like we have to hold accountability. And you know what? Most tight knit, good, high functioning special operations groups, or just your average everyday officer or your everyday firefighter paramedic, they want to be held accountable, whether they realize it or whether you realize it or not. Everybody wants to be a part of a elite team, a team that's pushing forward, a team that's meeting the markers. Generally, people that get into those lines of work, especially in those special operations small groups, they're high functioning and they want that accountability marker so they can make sure they're meeting requirements and exceeding requirements. So when you realize like, hey, I'm actually failing the team when I don't hold people accountable to a certain standard, then it becomes a problem. But I'm always going to search for internal accountability through that kind of that checklist I said
Mm.
before I ever look to hold someone else accountable. Because the problem is someone will screw up. What's natural instinct is I'm going to hammer them. I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to make an example. And it's like, it's not sustainable. Like accountability is a tool, but it shouldn't be your crutch, right? It should be something that we're utilizing when we need to. Internal first, external second.
I mean, there's a ton to unpack there. Like we can go on for hours just like talking about this
Yeah.
topic here, but like the way I've expressed it to some of my folks, some of my officers and sergeants on my shifts, is that there's two forms of discipline. There's the self-discipline, the what you hold, like you keep yourself disciplined and maintain that and maintain it for your group, or there's discipline that will be imposed on you, and
Yeah.
that's the discipline that we don't want. Is we don't
Yeah.
want to get to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jocko talks about this a lot. Like, what type of discipline should we strive to have? Self-motivated internal discipline. If each and every one of us are striving to have that as an individual, man, that's going to create an unstoppable team. But one, like your internal piece of discipline, that is something that benefits you and benefits everyone. And then the external, it's really a punitive measure. And ultimately, I want, guys and gals on a team that I work with to all want to be there and want to do the right thing for the right reason,
Mhm.
because they believe in the mission, because they believe in the team, because they believe in what we're doing, not just because they're worried about external punitive measures that I may have to place on them as a team leader or so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we tend to view discipline that way in a negative connotation. When I ask people, we'll go on workshops, I'm like, hey, if I say discipline, throw one word out. And they're like, punitive, restrictive, rigid, all these limitations. And I'm like, that's our problem, is that's how we see discipline in that negative light.
One of the things that I kind of struggled with when I was first promoting is, okay, well, how do I set my expectations? Like, how do I make sure the team knows exactly what they should expect from me and what I can expect from them? And a lot of different people talk about that. The military can call it like commander's intent. Simon Sinek might call it a mission statement or your why. Brene Brown says, clear expectations versus stealth. Like we all talk about it, but what's a good way to kind of go about having that conversation and bringing forward those expectations so that it's clear to the point where everybody's on the same page?
Well, I think there's a key aspect that changes the environment and the approach here, and that depends on the relationships.
Mm.
So like if you're a new leader into a team, or you're inheriting a team, or you're promoting into another team, and that team has specific issues, or they're not meeting certain performance markers, whatever it is, generally speaking, on the accountability front or the changes front, I would recommend not trying to make any large sweeping changes on accountability when you first arrive.
Mm.
That's generally speaking not a great idea, with one caveat. Unless you discover something that's like unethical, immoral, illegal, or unsafe, then it's like, okay, cool. We need to change these things immediately and hold accountability to these things. Other than that, your best bet basically to try to get the buy-in to make those cultural changes and make sure people are meeting the mark, spend some time observing, spend some time building relationships, spend some time gaining that influence. Once you gain the influence, then you can start saying, here's our marker. Here's the changes we need to make. Here's the line that we need to hold. And then here's the thing that we're not going to let go. And you also, as a leader, have to understand, like, you have to pick and choose your battles. Like, I have to is this worth, dying on the hill over,
Mm.
type thing, right? Sometimes we want these accountability, we want to hold these standards, hold these lines, and we're like, they're really kind of like menial, like they don't mean a whole lot. They're just preferences. If we want to be able to be successful, hold the line on the important stuff. And some of the other stuff, like, it's okay to turn a blind eye and let your team build their own culture and their own some of their own aspects of how they want to function, as long as we're again in that legal, ethical, moral, and safe thing.
Mhm.
But holding the line is important, and it's going to be a lot easier if there's a mutual respect in a relationship where, guys and gals aren't just worried about, again, the punitive measures. They're worried about failing their leader, because that's the primary motivation I want for someone on my team. I don't want someone that's worried about being held accountable because of punishment. I want someone that wants to hold themselves accountable because they don't want to fail the people to their left and right.
Yeah.
So, especially in that new team environment, or the person who is, sitting at the tier one leadership looking over the rest of this group, it's like, choose your battles wisely, right? So often we have people come in and they're like, hey, sweeping changes, we're going to change this. I'm going to hold everybody accountable. And it's like, you're going to lose the support of the core group if you do that. And it's just going to be an uphill battle for a long period of time.
Like you worked in special operations with SWAT as a TAC medic. Like those high performance teams are great in those tight knit communities, but not all are like that. Some folks, they go to these teams that they have issues. They are low performing, poor morale. How do leaders like walk into these teams and then start to turn them into those high performing teams?
Yeah, so that like that new leader walking into, maybe it's not a special operations group, maybe it's just, a general patrol sergeant that's going to be in charge of a shift, or maybe it's a house captain on the fireside, or maybe it's a battalion chief, or it's a lieutenant in charge of an entire, set of patrols and different special teams. The first thing I have to uncover is why. Why is there low morale? Why are they low performers? What part of the mission are they not bought in on? Generally speaking, you're going to figure out that one of the things that's lacking across the board is information. Most of the time, people get disgruntled. They don't have buy-in. They're not performing. They don't realize the metrics, and they're walking around, honestly, thinking they're doing the right things because they don't understand, because there's a misalignment of the overall mission priorities, whatever that mission priority is, right? So as a new leader, hey, look, how do we elevate the performance? How do we get the buy-in? How do we gain the influence? Not through iron fist direct leadership influence. That's not influence. That's just being a boss. Being a
Mhm.
boss doesn't make you a leader. Those
Leading
are
by
not.
rank, and that's all.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
we confuse that too much in the first responder world. Like, oh, leadership is rank. No, it's not. Like,
Mhm.
that's management. That's not leadership. So, like, how do we turn this into a high functioning team? It's all going to come down to uncovering the why. And you're going to hear me say this a bunch, and I don't want to sound like I'm, a broken record or kicking a dead horse, but relationships are truly the key, right? You have to build a team that's doing the right things for the right reason. You have to build a team that has the motivation that's not self-serving. And when you can, how do you build that team? You foster an environment where everyone has a relationship, everyone cares more about the person standing to their left and right than they do about themselves. It's a hard thing to do when you don't know your people. You have to know what makes them tick. You have to know where their deficiencies are. You also have to know where their strengths are. Maybe you have someone or a certain group of people that are in positions that they're not best suited for. It's like this is not their strong suits. Maybe you're like, I need to spend some time with them, figure out their learning mechanisms, figuring out their strengths, and then say, hey, you know what? You know why you're failing? This isn't the best place for you. I'm going to move you over here. I'm going to put you in charge of this. And you can only do that through, like I said, walking into that team, focusing on observations, focusing on building a relationship and uncovering the why. Why are they disgruntled? Why are they unprepared? What resources do they need that they haven't been getting? Could be one, two, or all of those things. We have to
Yeah.
stop walking into an environment and immediately want to do, well, what I said earlier, that first point of accountability. Hey, do this or we're going to crush you. Hey, do that. It's like you're going to get people that are minimally functioning, trying to scrape by every day and do the right thing, not because they care, only because they're just trying to avoid punitive measures. You're
Mhm.
never going to have a high performing team that way.
Yeah, it's I get a term for it would be fear-based leadership. Basically, you're doing it
100%.
through punishment only. And that's not really the way to go. But let me ask you this. You may subscribe to the extreme ownership mentality, but we were talking about, as coming in as a leader and maybe a person doesn't have all the information.
Mm.
What if your supervisor, your boss, your direct leader doesn't subscribe to this? How do you, as like that middle rung, kind of deal with conflicts that make it difficult leading in the chain?
It's impossible for me to always agree with top tier leadership. It's not
Mhm.
going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And this is a frequent question that we get when we're doing workshops or working with agencies. People are like, well, but here's the thing. Like, I love this when they start off with, you don't understand. I'm like, all right, go for it. And they're
Yeah,
like,
this
you
is
don't,
an original problem. You've never heard this before.
yeah, yeah, you've never heard this is so unique. They're like, but how are we supposed to take extreme ownership when, the chief or the sheriff or my lieutenant or my captain or my whatever, my superior, they're not bought in. I don't agree with what they're doing. And like, how am I supposed to make a change? Because here I am, I'm just a sergeant or I'm just a captain on the fireside, which is in charge of like, the house or a full apparatus company. I'm a mid-level manager essentially, right? And what I tell people is I'm like, hey, first of all, stop saying you're just a this or you're just a that. Understand that those mid-level managers are the most crucial positions in any organization. So those mid-level promoted leadership positions, so your sergeants, your corporals, and then on the, EMS, fire side, you have those, lieutenants if they have them, those, senior firefighter engineers, those house captains. They're crucial because that's where either alignment happens or alignment fails. And so I would say it's understand it's impossible for you to always agree with everything that's coming down the pipe. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is who's extreme ownership about? It's not about them, right? That's the definition of extreme ownership is recognizing I can't always change somebody else, but I can always change me. I'm always in charge of my response to stimulus. So then I ask myself this question. Is whatever's happening best for the team? Is it going to push the team forward? Is it safe? Is it, ethical? Is it legal? Is it moral? All those things. If it meets yes, I'm not going to fight against it. I'm going to do whatever that superior has asked me to do as long as all those markers are met. And I know it's going to be the betterment for the team.
Mm.
Understanding that when we want to fight the system, when we don't agree, when we take that mentality of, well, I'm just a cog in the middle of this big machine, first of all, you're giving up all of your power. And second of all, you're making it about you. That's a real thing. And then you have to start searching that ego path. Why am I fighting this battle? If it's not going to be detrimental to my team, I'm going to support it. And another reason is because if I'm constantly fighting every single thing that comes down from my superior, is my superior ever going to listen to me? Are they ever going to lend me an ear? No, because I'm the one that's always doing this. It's the least effective way to lead up your chain of command. So I need to start working on my relationship with that person. If I disagree, I'm going to be like, okay, I want to be able to influence the person above me because that's what leadership is. Leadership's influence. I don't care what brass is on your collar, how many stripes are on your sleeve. None of that matters. Leadership's influence. Chain of command is still important. I'm not saying it's not. And it's there for important reasons. But like, if you disagree with something, ask yourself again, is this a hill worth dying on? It's probably not. And if you're sitting around, the question we get, like, we'd be so great if the Chiefs would just hear this. Oh man, if the boss would just hear this message. So we'll tell people, hey, we'll be honest with you. The people you want to take ownership, they're not going to do it. Just assume they're not going to do it because it's not about them, it's about you. So you have to figure out, how do I navigate getting more influence over that person? Or how do I influence them for the betterment of the team? Now, we're not talking manipulation, right? There's a difference between influence and manipulation. Manipulation is if you're only doing it for yourself. Now it's manipulation. But if you're doing it for the betterment of the team for a multitude of reasons, now it's leadership and influence. So understand you're never going to agree all the time. It's just not possible. But you have to pick and choose your battles and realize what's worth putting your neck out for and prioritizing your team over your own personal beliefs sometimes. The team first mentality for mindset makes embracing some of that suck of disagreement a little bit easier, right? Because then you're there for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you have to ask yourself. Is my pushback, is it righteous? Or is it something that's like, it's a personal preference? A safe bet, if you feel like, hey, I feel like I'm just the middle rung, I have no influence, I disagree, they're not bought in, or I don't like whatever strategy or tactic they're getting ready to roll out, always assume there's something you don't know. Always assume. Assume that there's part of this perspective, there's part of the problem, there's part of the plan, there's a reason that you don't know. And people will say, well, they don't tell us anything. Well, okay, I get it. Like, you have one person who maybe has a span of control of 6 to 7 people, but ultimately they're in charge of 500 or 1,000 or whatever. Like, if there's a piece of information that you feel like maybe you're lacking, whose responsibility is it to go get it? It's that person. Go get that information. So seek perspective. Assume there's something you don't know. That's always the safest bet until proven otherwise. You could have been mad all day, or you could have taken 5 seconds of ownership and said, let me go seek to find out why we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's ultimately really important for like what you were talking about, those middle leadership, that those middle managing leadership, in
Yeah.
that before we pass down information, if we're not clear on it, we need to be clear on it before we tell our guys to go do this, because we need to be able to answer all the questions that they're going to bring up. And if we don't know, we need to ask.
100%. You gotta realize that, like, you're an insulation layer too.
Mm.
Like, those middle promoted positions, you're an insulation layer. So you're definitely going to filter complaints that come up, and you should mitigate everything you can, and it should not penetrate past you unless it's something important, right? Because we want to protect the image of that team below us, right? We don't want, all the complaining and all that going up to the boss. But also, when things come down, if something doesn't make sense, like you said, go get clarification, because ultimately you're going to be responsible for setting the tone and getting the buy-in and motivating the team to buy into that mission set. And then the question is, how do you do that? Because a lot of people, when you're trying to influence up your chain or seek information, we have to understand tact, tone, delivery, and timing of this is very important. If I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, boss, why are we doing this? It's stupid. No one understands. Like, how well is that going to go? And I know that seems asinine to, but we do it. We do it with our body language. We do it with our tone, our tact, and our timing for sure. So it's like, well, how do we do this? Well, first of all, hopefully you have a good relationship with this person above you. If not, first step, like I said, work on building that. But I go to this boss and I'm like, hey, boss, do you mind investing some time in me for a minute? I'm having some trouble seeing why this plan is this way, and that's my fault. I'm not read in all the way. I should have studied more. I should have paid better attention, whatever reason it is. But I need you to invest some time in me because when the people below me come and ask me why, I want to make sure I'm giving them good information. Do you mind sitting down and chatting with me for 5 minutes? What do you think that person's probably going to do? They're probably going to go, yeah, sure, totally. And then you can properly disseminate the information to the team below you. And even if you disagree, again, we talked about how to figure out how, why, and all that. You never put that down to your people. Hey, we're doing this. It's stupid, guys. I know. Like we can't do it. Like that's detrimental to the overall motivation and belief and heart of the team.
Now, we talk a lot about police on this show, but tell me about your experience as with leadership as a firefighter. Like, what do you see there as a lot of differences, or does it seem like it's the same issues that you hear now working at Echelon Front?
Yeah, it's funny, man. What's that phrase? It's like same circus, different clowns or
Yep.
something like that. Yeah.
I
It's
always
kind of,
like it's not
I
my
don't mean that.
not my clown, not my circus, but you know.
Yeah. So it's like, and I don't mean that in a derogatory manner, but
Right.
look, it's the same stressors, it's the same issues, and it's the same victories, right? The same answers. Between police and fire, there's different stressors and there's different variables for sure, right? And I always try to be super careful because, one of our leadership philosophies is leadership's the solution to all your problems. Well, that doesn't mean all your problems are the exact same, but the answers are the same,
Mm.
right? The answer is leadership, the answer is ownership. So when you look at the way a police department or a fire department is structured, and now don't get me wrong, like I don't know the ins and outs of being a police officer because I was super lucky in that I only got to do all the fun stuff. You know what I mean? Not the day in, day out, all the struggles
Everybody
and
loves a firefighter. We all get it. It's all good.
hey, it is what it is, right? So, and in my limited, my handful of years working as a SWAT medic, obviously we're fully integrated into the team. So we're dealing with some of the politics of the policing world and obviously the policies, procedures, best practices, and case law and all that stuff. So I'm a little bit familiar, but like I'm not out on the road, writing tickets, and I'm not out on the road dealing with some of these different calls. We're doing the same thing in a different capacity with those face-to-face issues, but the issues are all the same. The issues all revolve around lack of leadership, lack of ownership, and no lack of egos in the police or fire department, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I would say, and now that I'm traveling all around the country and I get the awesome opportunity to work with police, fire, EMS, and military units all over the country and also Canada and different areas, it is astonishing to me how the problems are all the same. And my career path was unique in that I worked in 3 different states with 4 different agencies, just due to some big family moves and deaths in the family and sicknesses, illnesses, stuff like that. But I would say the most important thing that I gained in all those different environments, different agencies, some massive metropolitan agencies, tens of thousands of calls a year, some more rural, and then a multitude of different special operations, whether it was on the fire tech rescue side or on the PD SWAT side and all that, all the same problems,
Mm.
all the same problems. And the greatest thing that I gained from that was perspective, because we only have one perspective unless we seek it out, right? And we try to see things from different angles. But
Yeah.
every issue that I saw in the fire department, I saw on our SWAT team. And every issue that I saw when I'm going to work with police departments, I see in the fire departments. It's all lack of relationships. It's all lack of alignment because poor communication skills. That's where we drop the ball as responders, generally speaking, the most. We're usually okay operationally. Like we know when we click up a radio, like we're going to try to be as simple, clear, and concise as we can, right? Don't get me wrong. There's always that one guy that clicks up and goes, right? Like figure it out, man.
Yeah,
But
I was about to say, no, dude, I know some people, but yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we all know those people. And that exists too. But as a whole, like
Mm.
operationally, we're fairly good with communications in the moment, but we are not good with communications on a day-to-day basis. We're not good with planning. We're not good with simplifying things. And that's what causes a lot of our misalignment. So we'll have different parts of the agency, different parts of the team walking around, not knowing what the left hand, what the right hand's doing, and all that. And you see that in the fire department, you see that in the police department, you see that in the admins at both levels and the operations at both levels. And you see it in corporate America. We see the same problems, right? You'll have the C-suite, which you're looking at basically tier one leadership equivalency in an agency. The C-suite, no one's on the same page. And then when they're talking to their mid-level actual managers, so they're talking to their, VPs of sales and all that, which equivalents for us would be obviously your captains, your lieutenants, your sergeants, or whatever. It's the same problems, all these misalignment, because our communication is way overcomplicated. And that's a major thing that we see in all of these realms.
Yeah. Oh, and with all those different perspectives that you've gained, in now working with Echelon, what is something that you wish you had back when you started? Like something that you've learned now that you wish you could tell back to yourself when you were first starting out.
Yeah, the power of detachment, man. So we teach and prioritize and execute, and we say at Echelon Front that detachment is a superpower, right? So in my last handful of years on the line before I came here full time, so I've been with the company since 2018, but 18, 19, 20, and 21, I was still with both agencies and doing part-time stuff. So in those 4 years where I started being able to implement these things, like detaching, taking a deep breath, step back, relax, look around, make a call, my detachment, um, and being able to actually implement the laws of combat and the mindsets for victory that we teach, I wish I had those starting back in 2005, right? It's like they're just so invaluable. You can't put a price on it, and they're so universal. And when I look back prior to 2000, not that I haven't failed past 2018, we're human, right?
Yeah.
But when I look back, 2004 or 5 to 2018, I'm like, man, I failed so many people. Like when I think back over these interactions and all these things, whether it's just personal interactions or in the field, making actual calls and leadership or in following, honestly, um, man, I just wish I had these things available to me, and I wish I had the intimate understanding of these things because it would have made things so much smoother. But the power of detachment, learning to detach, has drastically changed my ability to operate, not only just in stressful situations, but in everyday life situations, parenting my children, speaking to my wife, speaking to friends, dealing with frustrations, dealing with unknowns, all of that. It's just, I wish I would have had that 20 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And now you're doing the working as a trainer with Echelon Front. It sounds like a great opportunity. And honestly, I think we need more leadership training throughout all the different agencies, police, fire, EMS, because I don't think that we get nearly enough leadership training. And it's one of our fallbacks that, we fail at constantly. So what is it that you're working on now? Like what projects do you have going on that you're working on with Echelon?
We have an entire curriculum at Echelon Front. We have multiple aspects of the company. We have, of course, the keynotes, and we do half day and full day workshops, but we have what's called the LDAP side of our company as well, which is essentially look at that as a long-term relationship side with a company or entity or an agency.
Hmm.
And in that, we have modules, huge modules, not just, the four laws of combat. We have relationships modules, communication modules. We have hands-on training through our FTX program, where we take people out, we put them in a full platoon, and we bring the stress, right? So one of the things that we're working on, there's myself, all the instructors, all the cadre, and all the admin helps to create the curriculum. There's about 4 or 5 of us that are involved in the curriculum development team. So currently myself, Rob Jones, Corey, Meg, some of the girls that keep all of us knuckle draggers on base. We're developing more and more curriculum. We're developing more and more hands-on things. We're developing specific activities and core modules that can be placed on top of all of the training of the laws of combat. So it's a huge push for us that we don't want to be a one-trick pony, and we are not. And we will continue to develop. We're going to continue to make more curriculum. We have extreme ownership for at home. We have all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
So it's just a constant, building, structuring, and trying to make a better and better product out of something that we already truly believe in.
Yeah, I remember seeing recently online the extreme ownership for home for like family life. That was something I was like, oh shit, that's cool. That's something neat. And then also there's a ton of free stuff online that I've seen. And like I've gone through the Extreme Ownership Academy stuff that you'll have available, like
Yeah.
hours of videos online. So even if you're a smaller agency that doesn't have a huge budget for like leadership stuff, there is stuff out there. And you can always try book clubs and all sorts of other things just to kind of, get yourself online with teaching leadership amongst each other.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, for the first responder agencies of any kind, police, fire, EMS, or anything that's really like domestic preparedness, government, frontline medical workers, all that, we do a once a month, we do a free online training seminar. It's about an hour. All of our cadre cycles through. Sometimes it's Jocko and Leif and JP and Carlos, myself, Cody. A bunch of us cycle through it, and we pick a topic that we get from people that ask us questions like, hey, how do you deal with this type of leader? How do you deal with micromanagement? How do you deal with, a toxic culture? All stuff that we're familiar with in the first responder world, right?
Oh yeah.
And so it's free. Just you go to echelonfront.com, you hit first responder link, you just put in an email, and we'll send you like, hey, here's the Zoom link, and here's the date for the next one. And all the past ones are also, like you said, there's a bunch of free stuff on YouTube, Echelon Front, First Responders, YouTube, all of our previous topics. There's just a slew of information. We have full implementation programs. You kind of mentioned like book club. We have an implementation program that people can actually get a binder that actually gives you like an SOP protocol for how to run it and gives you all the ins and outs of the laws and all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, there's definitely there's avenues out there no matter what your budget is. There's events all throughout the year, of course, the musters and different FTX events and that all that. Plus, will come to you. So yeah, there's tons of resources. And like you said, we have the extreme ownership at home. This isn't just for work. This isn't just for your agency. This isn't a clock in, clock out leadership mentality. Like it's all capacities of your life. And where I've seen the greatest changes in my own life is actually in the walls of my own home. It's changed the way I'm a husband. It's changed the way I'm a daddy. It's changed the way I communicate in relationships. It essentially saved my marriage in 2016, 17. And that was my first exposure to extreme ownership when JP Donnell came to my house and basically told me, "You're the problem." And I really had to look in a mirror and realize that, man, I got to get to work. I got to stop sitting around waiting for other people to fix, the one or two issues that my wife may be contributing to. And I say this not facetiously. My wife's dang near perfect. Like I far outkicked my coverage on this one. I can't screw this up. Um, but yeah, man, it truly is so universal that it works anywhere you plug it in, and we've got the resources for it all.
Yeah, and that's great because also, like, as we all know, one of the biggest problems when it comes to law enforcement, fire, any first responder is that like our family life sucks. I mean, whether
Yep.
it be schedule, whether it be we have anger issues from the stuff that we see on a
Oh
daily
yeah.
basis, it just infuses itself into our lives. So having something that kind of gives you that step by step, what can we do, is awesome.
Yeah, and there's so many success stories that people email us or send us what we call a sit rep situation report, where they're like, "Hey, things were going terrible, and I started implementing this or that, and my marriage is great, and my relationship with my kids are improving." Because you're right, man. Like, look, when our home life is garbage, what do we take to work with us? All of that. And when our work environment is toxic and it's garbage, what do we bring home? We bring all that home, right? So it's important that we're executing on these things in every capacity. Again, this cannot be a clock in, clock out mentality, or you're going to fail in one or more aspects of your life, and eventually they will converge and it will explode on you. I want people to walk away realizing that they don't have to wait for change. Like you don't have to wait for change. You can be the change. You have a sphere of influence, and we have to view it as a campaign approach. Don't get overwhelmed by all the problems. Don't look at it as one huge thing that you have to bite off. I usually tell people, and this is my piece of information or advice that I give to people, and it came from my dad to me, who passed away a few years ago. And he used to tell me, Danny, draw a circle around yourself and deal with everyone inside that circle. And that's really what it comes down to. So I want people to understand that, like, whether you feel like you have influence or not, you do. And whether you feel like you're just a rung in the ladder, as we talked about earlier, hey, sometimes if that rung in that ladder is not there, it's catastrophic. So don't sit around and wait for people to change. Don't draw a line in the sand and say, well, I'll do this when this person does that. That's not how it works. Extreme ownership is about recognizing that you do have the power and the influence and the ability to change the environment around you. And you always, always, always have control over your response to stimulus. Nobody can take that away from you. That for me, that's the core belief of extreme ownership. And at a minimum, I want people walking away recognizing that they can be in control of their own destiny if they just step up and lead.
Thank you so much, Danny, for being here. And everybody, thank you for joining us today on the Blue Watch. Please share and subscribe for more leadership insights from the front line, and check out our website at thebluewatch.com. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.